Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody. We're happy to have you here at the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoutmeister, and this is the Tom Olson. And we are back with another podcast, and this time we're talking about something that's very current, it's in the news. It's COVID related. So you're not hearing enough of it, so we figure we bring more for you.
So has COVID changed the landscape of rental investing, Jared?
Yes, it has. Sure.
I think so.
And we're done.
And in some degrees, in some areas, way more than others.
Yes.
So
for a specific
and in some
title,
areas, negatively.
Very much so.
And in some areas, maybe positively.
We're going to talk about all that and more today
Okay.
in this podcast. So it's officially titled How COVID is Affecting the Market. How COVID is affecting the market. So obviously from the outset of COVID-19 and all the stuff coming in, there's a lot of things we didn't know, and there's a lot of projections, a lot of speculation on what was going to happen. And everybody had their own idea, and naturally so, not a lot of people knew what was going to happen, and so how to handle it, and then how it's obviously affecting things. And so, but today we're actually going to give some hard information, some current information with what's happening in markets around the country, and give you guys a little bit of information how that would help you. And we're going to start that actually by talking about some current news here in Gary, Indiana. So we had the mayor of Gary. There's an article just recently, just 2 days ago, October 27th, that's talking about a company, a company coming from California, a tech company, and they're going to be bringing their whole operation to Gary, Indiana, using a convention center that needs some attention, and they're going to take it over there, move their whole operation here, and create up to 2,000 jobs. And in the long run, over a few years. So, the idea here that one of the reasons why they're moving is because of California and the stipulations and the issues they're having with the government there. This is from the CEO, quoting the CEO. So we're seeing this would be, we would say, good for the city of Gary, and yet you're seeing it's very related to what's happening in today's market.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on many different podcasts, many different speaking engagements I've had over this last year, is that there is going to be a price to pay for these big city mayors, these big city governors that make these crazy rules and that they're very restrictive. For me personally, I mean, I actually, my beliefs on what COVID is, and I know that it's real, and I know that people have died from it. But I do believe that overall we've kind of had an overreach. We have had an overreach of shutdowns. We've had an overreach of restrictions, and even currently, like they just continue, and it just doesn't seem like in some areas there's no end. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about that to a certain degree. And I actually have pulled some hard numbers from other sources today that we're going to reference and kind of get into some of those numbers. We predicted this was going to happen in June, July, August, and now we're actually seeing real data, from a 6-month snapshot to kind of show what's really going on and how it might affect you if you're invested in different parts of the country.
Yeah, it's kind of like if this is being recorded at times after all the debates have happened. We're less than a week away from the election, and when you shut down a portion of your cities or country, you're gonna see job loss, and so we shouldn't be surprised when that happens, right?
I mean, we even have a Democrat mayor right here in Hammond, Indiana, that yesterday it was refreshing to me to actually, and I'm quoting him, he said that Mayor Lightfoot, who's the mayor of Chicago, and the governor of Illinois are making a huge mistake, and so it's interesting to me to even see another politician that's also a Democrat that also says, hey, you're making a massive mistake, but guess what? We're here in Indiana to take advantage of your huge mistake. And, so obviously for us, that sounds great. If I was living in the other side, or if I had, rental properties in the south side of Chicago, I might be thinking a little bit differently, might be really upset and maybe really angry. but it's refreshing in my opinion, because I think I'm kind of with him on that. Like I think they're making a massive mistake. And I, so I think that they're like, I predicted that this was going to happen, and we are seeing real data now to show that, New York City, if you just to bring out New York City, for instance, I mean, I think it's up to 250,000 people have left the city, have moved away from the city for good. Like they're done. They're not coming back. And who do you think those people are?
I can take a wild guess.
Do you think it's the people with the more money or less money? I think it's on both. It's actually on both ends of the spectrum. It's the people that lost their jobs, but it's also the money. So the money's moving away from these big cities, and we're finding the reason why a lot of it is because so many people are being able to work remotely now. So, I mean, it's a massive shift to where we were before, from even the hot upper middle class to all the way down to the working families. If you can't find a job, like, you have to go somewhere where there is business, and people are and there are going to be states and cities that are going to take advantage of this. And I'm glad that we're in an area that I think is poised to be able to take advantage of it.
It's interesting. So Tom and I both got to go to this event that was hosted by the Chamber of Commerce for both the cities of Hammond and Gary. And the one thing that the city of Hammond, that the mayor of City of Hammond, he mentioned was exactly what Tom said. And he talked about property values specifically. He mentioned that that there was overreaching from the mayor of this city of Chicago, and that how he believes that's had a direct impact in the economy in Northwest Indiana when it comes to he mentioned restaurants, the casinos, and even property home purchases. People moving to Indiana, and how days on market are basically in Hammond are 1, 2, 3 days. Especially for a home that's move-in ready, more or less. So it's really interesting. And again, like you said, a Democratic a mayor who's certainly a Democrat, but it's interesting to hear that perspective and how that's affecting even us here locally in our market. So Tom, you said you had some information. Why don't you jump in and start giving us some data for all that?
Sure. So I've got some data that I'm going to kind of read off of another screen that I'm looking at right now. And we're going to kind of just go through some of these things, and we can kind of stop, with each one. And because I think they all kind of have relevance, even back to the original article that Jared referenced at the very beginning of the podcast, to us specifically. So, I mean, as much as we want to, push us and what we're doing on this podcast, I think it's also interesting. And I think, a lot of listeners that listen to this podcast also have investments in other parts of the country. And I think and I do as well. So I'm thinking about this as well for my own personal investments. Most of what I do is right here. I get it because I believe in this, and I have a little bit of control of it as well. But I mean, if I'm looking at the whole country as a snapshot, there has kind of been this shift already that's happened. And I can take this back because I've been investing for 20 years. I can take this way back to 1995 to 2005. It was almost like there was this shift. In the mid 90s, there was this massive push for home ownership, and people didn't really want to live in the cities. They really started to move out. They wanted an acre of land. They wanted 2 acres of land. And a lot of manufactured homes, for instance, which our good friend Glenn Stromberg, does those homes like right outside of major metropolitan. They're not in the big cities like Dallas, but they're all an hour away. They're this big circle about an hour away from Dallas. He just did hundreds of them in that area. But those mostly were built and put on those lands. And in our area, for instance, you went all the way out to Lowell, Indiana, which is an hour away from where we're at now, or DeMont even. So like there was this massive trend between 95 and 2005 to kind of move outward. They were moving to the suburbs. The suburbs became much more populated, and people in Chicago, for instance, were moving all the way to Wisconsin and driving into those cities. And that's when a lot of the infrastructure was built to be able to do either train infrastructure or bus infrastructure or high-speed rails, and all those kind of things kind of happened. And then it was weird, like the 2008 retraction kind of. And really since 2008, we've been retracting. Everybody's been moving back towards the big cities. Land in general hasn't been worth more. It's actually been worth less unless you were in the big cities. So you found areas like San Francisco and New York City where it was just like the land prices just skyrocketed, and people just kept moving in. I mean, to me, like, we kind of benefit from both of it because we're like in the middle. Like we personally are right outside Chicago, so we kind of benefit from when people go out. We kind of benefit when people come in. But though it was like those third and those fourth tier, areas we're really seeing a big bump in 2000. Between 95 and 2005, and then the last 10 years it was kind of the opposite. And then COVID, I think, has made this immediate shift. It's not like a slow shift.
Sure.
It's not like people are just kind of moving out of New York City in a slow trickle. It is like massive, as fast as I can get out of here, I want to move. So we're seeing this, and so when it comes to real estate, we're seeing, in probably about 80% of the markets across the United States, we are seeing actually above list offers. We're seeing offers quickly and above list because overall we don't have enough inventory on the market. But at the same time, we're seeing in those top 20% markets like your Manhattans, like your San Francisco, for instance. San Francisco is down 4.9% since March. I mean that's a lot. That people think that just happened overnight in 2008 and this bubble burst. It didn't happen that fast. It takes a while for markets to go down. A report from July report from Miller and Samuel and Douglas Elmer says Manhattan is already down 4.2% since March. So there's more space available in those big areas, and really those markets that's been hit the fastest, the quickest is that $4 million to $10 million mark. And I know people listen to this are like, well, I'm not really interested in that. So why are you telling me this? Well, I think we need to be aware of the big picture and aware of what else is going on around us. And so buyers are those buyers are shopping in markets like San Francisco, like Phoenix, like Atlanta, like Raleigh-Durham, those places that people are looking to now move to. And Austin is even kind of getting people moving there. But then when they get to Austin or places like Austin, they're like, ooh, I don't want to live here. I want to move outside. So they're moving up to Georgetown or moving to those suburbs around those bigger metropolitan areas. So I just think it's very interesting. I mean, co-ops are down 75%. And then there's major reasons and factors that are fueling these seller markets. Tech connections have like these communities that are being built in workforce housing developments have kind of had some major shifts over the last 6 months. And I think one of the biggest reasons that's fueling this is the fact that we're going remote. They're saying 68% of government jobs may be remote forever and never really go back to working in the office and driving in. There were some statistics, and I don't have those in front of me right now, but I think it's it's even more than 68%. I think it's in the 70s percentage of insurance companies that are now working from home, and even banking institutions. Sure. A lot of these people that had to drive into an office, and tech companies obviously is another big one, where people it doesn't matter where they live anymore. So when you actually get to choose where you live and you don't have to be 15, 20 minutes from where your job location is, it gives people a lot more choices. And that's really what we're seeing is fueling this whole thing. So interest rates are also driving buyers. Interest rates were starting to kind of steadily have some steady bottoms and kind of go up. But, we're seeing, interest rates hitting new lows. We in September 2020 we saw 2.6 from Freddie Mac. I mean, at some point, like I think it's a bad thing for us, but I mean, for right now, it's a good thing. Housing inventory remains ridiculously tight. Yeah. The total housing inventory we've been saying this for years. Sure. It's not like this is something new where we've had tight inventory, but like it's down 18.8% year over year since June. So June 2020 back to June 2019, it is actually the housing stock overall is down 18.8%. That's almost 20%. That's a big deal. So for every 5 houses that were listed, that's really only 4. I mean, that's a big difference and a big shift. And really, I think we have to understand that has created a shortage So there's this massive shortage around the United States right now. We're down like 300,000 units than what we were, as far as what housing stock is actually available to people, and the most undersupplied states, which I think is interesting to think about. We talk about California, and people are moving away from California, but they still have a pretty big shortage of housing. So it's kind of, and I think the fires have also kind of, and people don't want to live even around those areas. That's also helping and driving that as well. I mean, I even have people in my mastermind and people that I consult with that, they just said, forget it, we're going to sell our house because, my 1,700 square foot house is going to sell for $800,000. I just have to. It just doesn't make any sense for me to hold on to this. We only paid $400,000 or $500,000 for it 3 or 4 years ago, and now I'm going to, sell it for $800,000. And I really think it's a good idea for them because, in my opinion, even if they had to rent for the next couple of years, who's to say that is going to stay that way? Sure. For the long term. But Oregon is also has a massive shortage. Colorado, I think a lot of people that live around Denver understand that shortage as well. And Florida is experiencing a massive shortage and being completely undersupplied when it comes to that. So again, it's things to think about. I think another thing to think about too, and I think COVID is even going to make this even go maybe more on average, although it's going to create a lot of shift. I mean, I think that's what we're kind of talking about. There are shifts that are happening right now, and people are going to move. But these next statistics are kind of talk in the opposite direction of that. But in prior to the mid 2000s, people would stay in their homes an average of 6 years, which is great for mortgage companies, and that's why they have the amortized note loan, and that's a whole different topic. But around 2008, people were staying in their homes 9 to 10 years. And I think people already knew this before COVID, but prior to COVID, people were staying in there since 2008 to 2018, 2019, people have been staying in their homes a lot longer. So now we've been talking, people have been staying in their homes for 13 years on average, and that's according to NAR. And I mean, that's a big deal. Like, it's a big deal in thinking about what happens to home prices. It also is a big deal when it comes to renting. I think it's actually good news. People stay in their houses longer. But at the same time that's happening, new construction views. So people looking to buy a new construction home. So this is staggering. So in February, year over year, in February 2020, it was up. People were viewing new construction 15% more than they were in 2019. It's the same day. In May, it was up 72%. And in June, it was up 83%. Now, that is just... That's mind. I mean, that means there's a lot of people on the internet, on places like Zillow, looking for a new place to live, and they're looking at new construction as that possible outlet. And at the same time that's been happening, new construction has slowed down. It is hard to get materials, and materials cost a lot more than they did just 6 months ago. I mean, we're seeing prices of wood double and triple. Yeah. So it's something to definitely pay attention to. And then there's really, I only have a couple more slides that I'm kind of looking at here, but millennials are also on the move. So I think that's something to consider. Millennials kind of slowed their migration for a while, but now millennials, have really picked up the pace when it comes to moving. But a lot of them moved back home. So like even in this, you're seeing a lot of kids not in college this last time, but half of young adults are living with their parents as of July, and that is the most it's been since the Great Depression. So we're talking about things that haven't happened in 100 years. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a staggering, and obviously you think about that's not going to stay forever. It's not going to be that way forever. But 1 in 5 young adults have moved themselves, or they know somebody else who has moved because of a direct result of the pandemic. We have a person in our office that worked and that just graduated from college last year. And he said that he has somebody that works for Disney, for instance, and they got laid off. Like they've laid off 20,000 people, so they've got to move because they don't have a job anymore. And it's very, very interesting because 25% of the nation's renters are more likely to move in 2020 due to this pandemic. So I think knowing all of this, I think if I'm an investor and I know this is already happening, this is not like, we're not theorizing anymore. Now we actually have hard data to show that it's happening, and I think we can continue to predict for at least the next 6 months, at least a year, maybe even longer, that this is going to continue. And I think if this would have just been a 2-week shutdown or just been a 3-week or 4-week thing, I think people would have gotten over it much quicker. But I think there's been a psychological shift and a mental shift that people are going to be stung by this, and they're going to feel these effects for maybe a whole nother decade. Really, honestly, I can see 10 years of people still thinking the way that they're thinking now, because I feel like some people are feeling they've gotten burnt so bad, and some people also are they're done. They're completely done. They're sick of it. They're not going to continue to comply with overreach regulations, especially from the business owners. Honestly, like there's so many business owners that I've talked to around the country that are having it doesn't make sense why they can't do what they do, why the overreach on restrictions. And, whether or not, whatever side you're on of these restrictions, it doesn't matter. They hurt business. And if you want to be on the side that says, well, I think it's good because we're keeping everybody safe, well, that's fine. I mean, there's many arguments on that we can go down on, from a medical standpoint. And, the nurses and doctors I know would probably differ from your opinion. But it's just very interesting to me that we say we're following science, but we're not really. And I'm not trying to make this, into anything that's like, against I'm definitely not political about this at all. It's really about to me, I want to help the business community. And I really do believe as business owners and as investors, we have to pay attention to what's going on. I mean, we've always said landlord friendly states. I mean, that's to me, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. I mean, where do I want to invest my money? I want to invest my money where I feel like is going to have the best opportunity to have return on my money. So, I mean, to kind of wrap all of that up, I mean, really, people are looking, they're moving away from, so they're moving outbound of California. California is seeing a mass exodus overall. We kind of already talked about Manhattan, but New York is obviously a place people are moving away from. But even like Washington, D.C., for instance. So Washington, D.C. is a place people are moving away from. Now, everybody in New York is moving far away. Because New Jersey doesn't seem like it's much better. Sure. So they're moving New York is moving to places like, they're getting at least as far as Philadelphia away. But we're seeing people move from New York. The number one state that people are moving away from New York to is Florida, actually. But we're even seeing people move outside of Chicago. We're seeing people move right outside of Atlanta. And we're even seeing them move all the way down to Texas. But Texas and Florida is the number one state that's actually getting some of these people. But in Richmond, but from Washington, D.C., for instance, like Richmond is only about an hour and a half away. Depending on traffic, it could be 2.5 hours. But so Richmond's a place that people are moving away from D.C. because why? They don't have to be in D.C. anymore. They're even moving out to West Virginia and the places out there. So I think if for my money, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, if I am investing, I am not investing into a big city right now, unless I'm in it for the long haul. If I'm in it for the long haul, I'm kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to crash even farther, because I still think it's going to be crashing in those big metropolitan areas. And if I'm a New York City investor, I'm probably saying there's no way I'm putting new money into this unless I don't really expect a return for 10, 20 years. And most of us investors, myself included, are just not that patient enough to say I want to be able to see that this is working right now. Really people are moving out of the Northeast for sure. And they're moving inbound, they're moving to the Midwest, they're moving to Tennessee, Texas, Florida, South Carolina. Those are states that we're really kind of seeing the move of those people to. But all in all, it doesn't matter where you're at in the country. we are seeing all big cities. And honestly, I don't know of a single big city that is seeing population move to. Most of even if they're moving to the big city metro, they're moving to the suburbs.
Sure.
So, and at the same time, anybody inside those big cities is moving to the suburbs at least. So we're seeing. I mean, we don't know the exact numbers right now, but like if I had to predict, I'd say somewhere between 15 and 20% of people are moving outside of the big metros, the Chicagos, even Dallas, even Houston, even obviously New York City, even Atlanta, because they've had some issues and a little bit of issues as far as the downtown and with riots and that kind of things. So if you think about it, like this is not just government overreach. This is also like people of safety. You think about the poor people up in Minnesota or Wisconsin. Like, think about those businesses. They're gone. The businesses leave. People don't have jobs. So if I'm an investor, I'm looking outside of those areas or just outside of those areas as a place where I think, maybe these areas have never kind of been on my radar, but I think I need to be looking at these areas now because even if I'm a Dallas investor, I might not be looking at the city anymore in the downtown city. I'd be looking at Plano. I'd be looking at the outskirts of all those cities, or I'd be looking for the cities where I believe are saying and making those stances that, hey, other people are making mistakes, but we're not going to make mistakes here. We're gonna welcome those new companies in, and we're going to be looking to bring in those new companies. And again, I've tried to stay away from our area a little bit, but I see that happening right here in Northwest Indiana, and I'm excited about it. I even told my leadership team this morning, I'm excited about it. I really do believe that we are poised and we are ready to take advantage of that. And there are other areas around the country that I believe are poised and are looking for that as well. So if you're buying from us, great. I mean, we can continue helping you, and we appreciate your support. But also, if you're buying from other turnkey investor or suppliers around the country, I would be asking these questions, and I'd be thinking about hey, like maybe honestly, I even like Indianapolis as a place to invest, but if I'm investing my money right now, I don't think I want to be in Indianapolis, and that's an Indiana guy. So like, I'm an Indiana guy. Honestly, even South Bend. I used to be pretty pro South Bend, but right now I'm like, I may not want to be in South Bend. I want to be in Mishawaka or the areas surrounding, even that big of a city. I'm even thinking, if there's been any disruption, if there's been any more unland, I don't know how to word this right, but like, how there's landlord friendly and then there's even more of being, landlord unfriendly. If there's been pushes towards those, and I'll tell you, South Bend's one of those areas. Oh, yeah. It's not a landlord friendly area at all, even though it's Indiana, which is traditionally a landlord friendly state. Right. South Bend is not landlord friendly at all. So, I mean, normally Indianapolis is pretty landlord friendly, but I'm thinking if it's me, I'm not even investing in there anymore. I'm wanting to go to the outskirts of even those cities because that's where people are moving. And that's where I think you're going to find the reasonable people. Because you think about it, if you're in those areas, are you going to be moving? I probably am thinking I might be moving right now if I'm sitting in some of those areas. And I want to rent to those people. And I want to rent to the people that are moving into areas where the jobs are going to go. So I would just put that in your hat, plant some seeds, and take those to your other turnkey providers as well, and ask those questions because I think they're very valid, especially in 2020.
It's interesting. You brought up investing in some of those areas where people are moving away from, and there is some opportunities there. Like say New York or something like that's interesting, but you'd also have to have the mindset of waiting.
Absolutely.
And there's
going to be some massive. I mean, it's kind of funny because I think most people are thinking that this whole podcast is anti-New York, those, but I mean, I think San Francisco's overpriced anyways, and I think the whole place is a dump. So that's just, that's me, and that's Nancy Pelosi for you. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi, the worst senator ever. Not trying to be political here, but anyways, so if you go to her city, like forget it. I won't. Just go there, and then you'll come back and tell me. And I got to experience what I got to experience this year in San Francisco, thinking it was going to be a beautiful city, and it's just a dump. Third world, seriously. That it's horrible. It's horrific. So eventually, think about it. Like eventually, what's going to happen in a market like that? I mean, New York, I don't believe is that bad. There obviously there are issues in our sewer issues and there's other issues in New York City. But I mean, it's still Manhattan, and it's still where a lot of business happens. And I don't think that New York's ever going to stay down for a long period of time. I think they're going to lose a lot of money, and I think there's going to be, which means there will be opportunity there for the big money. But that big money is going to have to understand and know, hey, we might be sitting on this. We might lose money for 10 years. And if you have that patience and you have that kind of money and you have that belief in that big, then yes, go for it. Go all in. But if you want to, I mean, that's not me. That's not my investment style. My investment style is to hit the base hits, is to eventually build long term. And I think most turnkey rental investors are more of that base. They're not looking for the grand slam. They're not looking to, put up, a tower in downtown New York or downtown Chicago. They're just looking for financial freedom. For me, and in my money, I think that the place to find it right now is going to be outside of those big cities, in landlord-friendly states and in landlord-friendly areas, but also areas that are going to probably take some stands that are going to be strong towards business and towards and away from some of the overreach of regulation that we've seen this year.
Yeah, so either way, when you look at that kind of investing, it's a larger snapshot. So if you're talking about investing in some of these in cities like New York City, or like what you're talking about, state of New York, or you're just in Northwest Indiana or in Indiana in general, you're still investing with a 30-year plan, and in this case, it's with cash flow in mind, so it's a little slow and steady. But
just in our local market, Jared, you can give this. We have seen a massive uptick since March. We are, I think we've seen 10% at least since March, which is a lot. And we're seeing houses, go for over list price. We're seeing houses sell on the retail market, and I feel bad saying this on the Turnkey podcast, but we've had to go retail on some of our houses just as our own decision making goes, because the same houses that we were selling for 110 6 months ago are selling for 150 on the MLS. And when it's a difference between 110 and 120, we just give it to the turnkey investor. Even if it's between 110 and 125, we might still go with the turnkey investor. But if it's a difference between 110 and 150 on the MLS, it's 15, 20 grand more in our pocket. And, we're not doing that on a lot of houses. Sure. Our focus really still is to help, Gary, and help that community and help the renter base. And, it's one of the issues that we have in Gary right now is that even if we had 2,000 new jobs that had tomorrow, which we actually do, with the casino opening up here in about 2 or 3 months, I mean, there's literally 1,800 jobs that have to be filled within those 3 months. There are areas that don't have the stock. They don't actually have the renter stock. I mean, it's a whole nother discussion for us, but when we put something on the market to rent, I mean, our average days on market for the last quarter has been 3 days from the time that we actually put it on the market to the time it's rented. It's crazy. I mean, and maybe we're just the world's best marketing. I don't think we are. I think I'm not really the best marketing person in the world. I have seen some other houses from other property managers in the area that for some reason are not moving that quickly. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I think they think that if you put a sign in the front yard, it rents, but that's just not how it works, guys, because people are at home looking on their tablets and looking online. Hint, hint. But anyways, it is fun to be in an area that I really do believe is poised and ready to be able to take advantage of this, but we still have a lot of work to do ourselves to kind of make sure that we can provide that stock.
Yeah, so again, this podcast was really dedicated to providing actual information as opposed to previous podcasts where we may have talked about some of the possibilities that's coming up. And so hopefully this podcast brought you value. Of course, we are still selling turnkey product. Tom mentioned that we do have recently listed some properties on the MLS for home buyers because that's where the numbers have taken it, the deal. However, within the city of Gary, for the most part, we're still marketing our turnkey project. We have several deals coming up here. So if you're looking to add to your portfolio or looking to start investing, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So you can reach out to me, Jared, at By Olson Group. That's my email, or you can go to our website at byolsongroup.com. And those are some ways that you can invest. And so definitely reach out.
Awesome. We would love to have your friends listen to the Active Turnkey podcast. So if this has brought value to you, please share this. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on all of the podcast channels. So if you would do us a favor, it would just mean the world to us to go to either Apple or Stitcher and give us a 5-star review if you've gotten value from our podcast, and really share this with your friends, and not just share it like on Facebook or share it in social media, but just share it with your friends and let them know about the Olson Group and let them know about the Active Turnkey podcast. Because a lot of stuff we talk about is not just relevant to us and not just relevant to what we can offer people, but I really do think that learning the education that we try to give can help you in investing really with anybody else. And you can ask some questions that we're providing answers to other property managers and other turnkey providers to be able to help you not just get the best deal, which I think is part of like what people think that they want to do, but really to be more educated and to understand the deal that you're getting. And that's what we hope to be able to provide with this podcast. As you guys can see, we don't really, today is a little bit of it is theory. Today's a little bit statistics, and a lot of other podcasts I know have these types of podcasts. But most of our podcasts kind of get into the nitty gritty and talk about specific instances and problems that do come up with owning a rental portfolio. And we try to address those on this show and try to help educate people on how we would handle it and how we would recommend you handle it if you come across those same situations.
So as far as education, it was a great segue, Tom. So Tom does have his ATK
I
book.
do have a book.
And so if you're interested in that, you can actually text Turnkey, the word Turnkey, TURNKEY, to the number 415-528-7403. And if you do that, we can send that book to you. And again, that's text Turnkey to 415-528-7403. So we appreciate you coming on our podcast. Our next podcast will actually be on the subject of how to handle them, like when the market shifts. What do you do with what are some options you have with your turnkey property? What do you do? So we'll talk about that next podcast. It's a good segue from this one to that one. So looking forward to talking to you then. But thank you for joining us today. So Active Turnkey,
the best way to buy rentals.
Thanks, guys.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.